My favorite part of the movie was Daniel Day-Lewis's interpretation of Bill the Butcher. Butcher?
Hey, Peter. God dang it, Bobby.
Welcome back to 191 Media, guys. I'm Micah.
And I'm Matt, and today we're going to review the movie Gangs of New York.
Gangs of New York came out in 2002 and stars Daniel Day-Lewis, Leonardo DiCaprio, Cameron Diaz, and John C. Reilly, and it was directed by Martin Scorsese.
In 1846, New York City is ruled by gangs. The two gangs, the Dead Rabbits and the Nativist Protestants, fight to see who will hold control of the Five Points territory. The leader, Priest Vallon, is killed by the other leader, Bill the Butcher Cutting. The priest's young son, named Amsterdam, witnesses this and is taken to an orphanage for the next 16 years until he returns to New York to seek out his revenge on Bill the Butcher. Could you tell us more about the plot of the movie and your thoughts on it?
You don't see a lot of movies based on that time period because it kind of takes place, the beginning of the movie takes place in 1846, and it follows all these gangs of New York who I don't remember exactly all their names, but there's a lot of weird ones. But I think the two ones are the Nativist Protestants that are led by Bill, the Butcher, and then also Priest Vallon, who leads the Dead Rabbits. And I guess it kind of, the first part of the movie is just like this huge battle, and there's like some weird things that happen in the battle, but it probably goes on for about 10 minutes, and you're like, is this ever gonna end? But I was enjoying it for the most part, besides like a few weird filmmaking parts, but whatever. And then it kind of skips forward to about 16 years where the main character, who is played by DiCaprio, is grown up, and he's kind of lived in this orphanage for most of his life, and he goes back to where it all started in New York, and I think he's trying to find Bill because he wants revenge on him, and it kind of just showcases, I guess, Amsterdam's character, and Bill's character takes him under his wing, and I think he's just trying to like butter him up to a point where he can trust him, and then, you know, he can maybe spill his secrets, and then maybe in the future, like Amsterdam can potentially plot how he can get a revenge on this guy.
I think the plot was done well and the story was cool, and it does make you want to find out how is Amsterdam going to plot his revenge on Bill the Butcher. So it was engaging, the story was great, and personally I found as well, just as a side note, the time period it's set in, you know, late 1800s roughly, it's almost felt out of place for me, because when I think of New York, I think of all these iconic places, maybe more modern, but this time period, it was almost like European style. Of course, all the Europeans were moving over, they're immigrating. I like this movie overall. I think it was a classic Scorsese movie, you know, although it wasn't a modern setting, you know, late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, it was still a gang style movie, which is, I think, Scorsese's forte, and I think he was trying to go into the gang style but old, so I think he pulled it off fairly well for what he had to work with, and I enjoyed the movie, although personally I felt it was a little bit slow. That was my first thoughts on it. What about you?
The one thing that I did notice, first off, what I thought about the movie is there was a lot of, like, it felt very old school. Like, there were so many like parts during the fighting scenes where it just felt like, okay, you know, this is like a early 2000s movie. I think I read that apparently the movie was supposed to come out, or Scorsese had the idea for the movie about 20 years before the movie actually came out.
Yeah, building off of that, what did you like of the movie?
My favorite part of the movie was Daniel Day-Lewis's interpretation of Bill the Butcher. Butcher?
What did you end up liking about this movie?
Yeah, I think my favorite part of the movie was Daniel Day-Lewis's interpretation of Bill the Butcher Cutting. He was probably the best part of the movie for me. Yeah, I think just everything that Daniel Day-Lewis brings to the screen is really well done. I don't know if he's a method actor, but he seems to really get into his roles. I think the one thing about Daniel Day-Lewis, he doesn't do a lot of movies, but when he does, he usually wins a lot of awards for them. So I think he kind of elevated this movie to being, because I think on Rotten Tomatoes it got about 73%, and I think it probably raised it. If Daniel Day-Lewis wasn't in the movie, it would probably be about 50% for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with you that Daniel Day-Lewis's character, his acting was phenomenal throughout the whole movie, and I almost want to say he carried it to an extent. But I guess to say something a bit different, I felt like this movie had tons of practical effects and huge sets, like the whole Five Points area where the movie's mostly based. It seemed, at least to me, I couldn't tell if it was CGI at all, but it seemed like a full-on set for every location, and it was a huge area, right?
I don't even remember there being a lot of CGI.
Well, that means if there was, it was done really well.
It's kind of that era where like more of the practical sets are hopefully still being used, because it's like the movie was made probably in 2000 and it came out in 2002. So was there anything that you didn't like about the movie?
The movie did feel a bit stretched out. It did feel really long. This was about a 3-hour movie, and I feel like it could have been condensed to maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes roughly. It's just, there were a lot of scenes that were made that didn't really add to the story. Like, yeah, you know, they help you feel for the character a little bit, or you see what struggle they're going through, but it doesn't really invest you more in the story. So I think from that perspective, that was my first point that I didn't really like. The second part was maybe a testament to some of the acting choices for the movie, whereas everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of the main characters such as DiCaprio and Cameron Diaz, they're playing Irish people in this movie, and their accent just keeps slipping for the whole movie. And I at first I actually thought DiCaprio, his character Amsterdam, I thought he was maybe playing an Irish guy when he was talking to Irish people to try to, you know, make them like him, and then when he's talking to American people, he plays an American accent to kind of play both sides of the table, but then it turns out he's full on Irish the whole time. What about you? What did you dislike?
For this movie, it probably could have been like an hour and 45, 2 hours at the most. Because I feel like at a certain point, like throughout the middle of the movie, you kind of, like for me at least, I felt a little bit bored. And there was like so many scenes that could have been cut. But I do agree with you, like DiCaprio and Diaz were not the greatest choices for these characters. Like you can tell like the more seasoned actors like Daniel Day-Lewis and Brendan Gleeson, who played the sheriff guy. And then also John C. Reilly was good, but I could kind of tell when his accent was starting to slip a little bit because he is American too.
Yeah, so essentially it's just too long and the acting wasn't the best. But other than that, I'd say this movie is very watchable. The story was entertaining.
So what did you think of the cinematography in Gangs of New York?
I think it was done well for what it was. Again, this was a early 2000s movie, and you did mention that the original idea for this was conceived maybe 20 years before that. So I definitely felt like it had very retro style filmmaking compared to today. It did feel very Scorsese, that kind of slow burning, slow shots, you know, very, I want to say eclectic, where there's a lot going on in most shots, and like there's a scene, there'll be tons of background characters doing things in most shots. So I think it was well done, and definitely the cinematography kept you entertained, and there's always something to look at in the picture. What about yourself?
The one thing I did like was the colors too, like especially in the 5 points, because you did mention there was like all these real practical sets that must have taken forever to like set up and tear down. There must have been like thousands of people working on this movie, but yeah, I thought the cinematography worked well in the movie, and obviously like Scorsese knows what he's doing. After like 16 years later, I think when Amsterdam comes back to New York in 1863, I thought it was interesting because that's kind of the time period when the Civil War is starting. So there's lots of like internal, I guess, racial strife within the city too, but a lot of like, I guess the storyline follows Irish versus the natives, who are pretty much, I mean, it's kind of funny when you think about it because all these guys aren't actually, like all of them are technically from Europe anyway, you know, so, but I guess the Irish get like a bad rap from different people.
Yeah, that was one thing that was kind of interesting, that, yeah, the nativist Protestants say they're the natives of the land, and all these, you know, Irishmen and other cultures are coming to America and ruining this country. But like you said, you know, there was even a shot they had of a indigenous statue of one of the leaders was there, and it's kind of like makes you think like, okay, all these nativist Protestants say they're the, you know, natives of this land, but it's like, no, you're not. You took this land too, right?
Who would you recommend to see this movie, Matt?
I'd say anyone who loves Scorsese movies, this is definitely one of his typical style movies, a gang movie, even though it's set in a different time period. And if anyone really likes drama movies which have a really good plot to it, definitely check this movie out, and especially if you love good acting. Maybe not good accents, but the acting was good. Especially Daniel Day-Lewis was a highlight of this movie. How about yourself?
really, if you just want to see an actor really apply his trade, you see Daniel Day-Lewis with his interpretation of the Butcher. So I thought that was the highlight of the film, and people, like, I agree with what you said, people who want to watch like a, not a thriller movie, but like a good action movie with a good plot. I guess if you can get past the long runtime, I think you should be okay. And if you can get past those accents, you should be okay.
Did you have any other comments you wanted to add about the movie?
Yeah, so one thing I did find that was really interesting online, just a little bit of trivia, is Daniel Day-Lewis really gets into his characters. And so the Butcher had a fake eye, and I guess what Daniel Day-Lewis had done is he covered his eye in prosthetic glass, and then he kind of practiced to make sure that he would not blink, and then he would start tapping it. And there's a part in the movie where he does that, and I thought it was really interesting. So I don't think there's a lot of actors that actually would go that far in a role.
Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis is a serious method actor. I looked up some stuff about him and he just gets so into the roles. Like, apparently there's instances where he'll tell the crew not to talk to him for months just so he can keep hearing the same accent that he needs to hear and not talk to the crew that has different accents. Like, he's a serious actor.
Maybe he's just a real introvert.
Just don't talk to me, guys. I just need to be by myself. Oh, I'm a good actor, don't worry.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any other movies you'd like us to review, let us know in the comments section down below.
And if you liked the video, don't forget to drop us a like and hit that subscribe button.